There's a couple of things that I want you to notice about where I'm starting today on this painting. And one is I've got sort of an outline drawing already on the canvas. And you can see off to my right there, I'm utilizing my iPad for reference material. I don't often do this, but this is a technique that I do incorporate from time to time in my painting. So the background is created from another video. You can go back and watch how I created the background in another video. But this one, I've gone ahead and drawn that basic image that I want to have painted on to the canvas. And I do that with one of two things, either an actual piece of chalk or a charcoal pencil that's in white. And that gives me some guidelines. I don't have to think much further past this stage about how things are going to be laid out or the shape of things, if they're right or not. I'm simply putting my sketch in there, which doesn't have to be exactly like your reference material. Your reference material is just for reference. It doesn't have to be completely copied. So if you notice, the image has her hand up on her face. And in my painting, I did not want that. I just basically was looking for basically her eyes. The tilt of her head basically was the two things that I was after, the tilt of the head and the coloring around her eyes. The rest of it, I'm just sort of making up as I go. And using that photograph as the simplest reference that how you can use reference it. I don't typically ever use any photograph and paint what I see in the photograph. That, to me, is not as artistic or creative as using your reference to guide you toward the image that you imagine in your mind. So with that being said, I would like to mention that on my Patreon page, I have a reference library. I go around the country and I take pictures, and I'm trying to put as many of those up as I can each week. I post each week on there and add to this image library, which is completely copyright free. You don't have to worry about stepping on toes when you use those images as reference material, much like I'm using this image for reference material. I'm not copying the photograph, and I don't feel like, unless you're you're a student, you're learning to paint, there's not much to gain from copying a photograph. If we want to look at something that looks like the photograph, we can just put the photograph on our wall. We don't need to paint it exactly. So the idea here is that you've got reference material that you can use. You don't have to worry about anybody saying anything about your copyright. Oh, you infringed on my copyright. If you're not familiar with utilizing reference material in the way that I'm describing it here, where I'm simply using it as the tilt of the face and maybe a little bit of insight into the lighting or the coloring of the eyes. Beyond that, you're not going to recognize this painting as that photograph. There's not at all the same. I'm not including a hand. I'm simply looking at the degree of the angle of the face to make sure that my perception is right, my perspective is correct. And then, I'm painting in colors that are not at all the photograph. I'm painting in the colors that I want to use that I pulled out from the color cube. And again, that was all in the first video. I'm not going to make it all the way through this painting in this one setting. I'm going to get to a spot where I'm going to have to quit for the day. And so there will be a third video down the road where it will show, from this mid place of painting to the final painting. So look for that as well. So there's a little bit of a backstory on this. I had gone into a meditation. This was a guided meditation, and the meditation was about some Japanese mythology, I guess you could say. And it was very moving to me. And I felt as though I wanted to paint an image that would reflect those feelings I had during this meditation. And you can find that meditation here on YouTube. It's by Selena Rodriguez, and I will look up that URL and stick it in the comments below in case you're interested in listening to the meditation yourself. It will enlighten you to what I've painted here. So anyway, beyond that, I've also placed a bird, and maybe you can tell that there's a bird sketched in there, maybe not, but what I'm painting now are some of the tail feathers. And this is a mythological creature from their tradition, and the bird is maybe not 100% like correct in its anatomy or its ability to fly with such tail feathers, but maybe it could. I don't know. It didn't matter. It was the imagery that I was going after. They kind of remind me of peacock feathers, and peacock feathers bring up a couple of things. It's like, what are you proud of? Are you proud to be who you are? And are you taking your pride and then being boastful about it? Because there's a real fine line between going into yourself and feeling proud of who you are and proud of what you're accomplishing, and stepping over the line into this place where you're then coming off as being egotistical, or that you're somehow better than other people because you feel so good about yourself. And here I feel like the way these tail feathers are wrapping around her, sort of embracing her in a way, I feel like that's balance, like balance between the two. You want to be proud of yourself. You want to be proud of what you're doing in your life and who you've become, and proud of the direction of who you are yet becoming, and yet feeling more at one with everything rather than being better than anything or anybody. So that's kind of give you just a basis of what it is I'm painting here. And I'm going to just pause my conversation for a moment and let you just watch the technique and the way I'm applying the paint, and how I am also creating layers in what I am painting. I want to point out a couple of things here as I'm painting this middle portion of the painting. You'll see me begin to paint in the legs of the bird, which are basically pushing off from the shoulder of the woman. And now you can see where the bird is and what you're seeing of the bird. You're not seeing the head. It kind of cuts it off just beyond the wings, so you're not seeing what the head of that bird looks like. And I know a lot of times artists like to, especially beginning artists, like to put everything into the picture plane. Like there's space all around the we'll say image that you're trying to create, and it's not always necessary to do that. I think if you look through some art history books, you'll find that there's a place in time where suddenly people become aware that, you know, something could be leaving the picture plane. And so that's how I have interpreted the bird, because I felt like the bird would be big. It'd be a huge bird, and there's no way I was going to be able to fit that in to the picture plane and make it make sense the way I want you to interpret the painting. So you see the legs pushing off the shoulder, and how the legs, then it's giving you that impression that this is a huge bird. It's not a small sparrow or songbird that you would find in your backyard. The other thing I want you to notice here is I want you to notice the different ways I'm applying the paint to the canvas. So when it comes to the woman, her face is a little heavier on paint, but not really that much, because that was a lighter area of the canvas to begin with where I placed her face. Now, the rest of her body, you can see there's still a lot of the background colors coming through. And I'm doing that intentionally. Like, I'm painting very lightly with the color. I'm trying through this whole part of this painting to be very light-handed, not totally covering up the paint that lies underneath of it, but being light-handed with the application so that I am indicating that she's there and present, but she's also part of the background. Now, later in the painting, and even into the second video, you'll see I will get a little heavier-handed with the paint, and some things disappear. The background sort of disappears in parts of it, but the colors that lie underneath are still adding to the overall feeling of the painting. And because no matter, like, I'm not looking at the parts that are showing through and thinking, oh, I have to cover that up. That doesn't look like natural skin. I'm not trying to create something that is photorealistic. It's an interpretation. Your paintings don't have to be what we would call naturally real, okay? So this is sort of a fantasy-like painting anyway. It's about mythology, so it doesn't have to be realistic looking. The more I can keep that light airiness, like if you could see what looks like hearts, but it's actually a leaf, a heart-shaped leaf, and you can see that red, that pinkish color is still showing through. And if we go back to the color cube, you could see that this pink and reddish area is actually a little more pink or red than the palette that I picked out. But the green over the top of that area tones that down and makes it more like the color cards that I pulled out. So there's a little bit of color theory going on here to where, you know, you're creating another color. You can see in the middle of that leaf that's in the lower left-hand corner how it is a different color now than the pink that's above it. it's more in alignment with those color cards. The other thing I want to point out is here's where I got a little heavy-handed in the application of the light color in the wing of the bird. It's not really bothering me just yet as I continue to paint and add in layers over some of the things I've already painted, but you'll see me going back into this area a couple of different times, and eventually I get to the point where I'm frustrated with myself because I feel like I've applied the paint too heavily in that area. But I just keep going. I'm just painting along and not letting it bother me just yet. If you've been watching the way I'm applying the paint, you'll agree. I got heavy-handed here. And that part of that wing is what's standing out to you right now in this painting. So I go in here and I'm trying to create some of the individual feathers coming off of that wing, and that still, it's going with some of the other colors I've been adding in. It's bringing in that teal, turquoisey color into different areas, and that's all fine. But looking at it here, and I think I might be scratching my head over it, you can clearly see that that part of the painting now looks entirely different than the rest of the painting. I went there a little fast, so I don't mind pointing out what I feel like was a little bit of a mistake. Getting heavy-handed with the paint was a mistake at this stage of the game. But it happens, things happen, and sometimes they happen for a reason. But as I continue, I become more and more frustrated with the fact that I did get heavy there. I've shifted the energy a little bit by standing up, and I'm going in now to try to make some of those, what we'll call peacock feathers. It's not really peacock, but I'm trying to make those stand out a little bit more by adding some darker value. Here's one of the things to notice as you're painting, where are your values? A painting can be mostly mid-tone values, that would be fine, but at some point there needs to be, I feel, for my own work, that there needs to be a clear definition between the values, having distinct darks and distinct lights that guide and direct the way you look at the piece. And I'm painting her hair black. That was my intention all along. I wanted her to have sort of an Asian sort of look, because that would go along with the mythology that I'm trying to paint here. And her hair becomes very dark contrast to what will be light in the rest of the painting. And I'm continuing to paint in over the top of what I had described her hair as blue. I used blue as a way to, show some highlights, because in black hair it can be very flat if you don't put in some other colors and other values into it. So the blue, you can see now, is covered up quite a bit, but it's still in there, and it still makes the blue on the bird and on the tail feathers on the other side of the painting, makes the hair go with it all. I'm going to share one more tip here before I end for the day, and that is when I go in to choose a color, to pick a color to put on the canvas, I'm not cleaning my brush. You don't see me actually cleaning the paint off my brush, almost never, because I'm utilizing the color I already had on my brush when I'm picking up the new colors to harmonize all of the colors. By having a little bit of the other colors already in the brush, when I go to paint in these leaves, for instance. I was just painting in black and blue, right? So now that black and blue is kind of added into the green that I've got, and it all harmonizes one with the other.